May Pang, it is great to be with you. And might I say, bravo. The Lost Weekend, a love story, your documentary. I have to be totally frank. It is riveting, it is compelling, and how extraordinary.
Did you know everything about me after you watched all of that? I mean, did you know anything? Was anything new to you?
May, so much of it was, and let me say, I think even the most dedicated John Lennon fan will go, wow. So much of what people think they know about you, what they think they knew about him, is kind of out the window, incredible.
In making this movie, it was, I try to stay out of it. So I let the producer, the filmmakers do their thing because I didn't want to be, because if I tell it, it'll be all over the place. But as filmmakers, they knew what to do. So I gave it to them. So they did a fabulous job. I only saw the whole thing towards the end when I came in to do the narration.
I got to say, it's a roller coaster ride of extraordinary emotion, so many memories. And then the end, and we won't give too much away, but just when you are there, I suppose, looking back, and it does become very teary. It's been 50 years since you and John wound up in that passionate 18-month romance, but as is revealed in the documentary, of course, your friendship went long beyond that. Does it seem, May, half a century to you that is when it all began?
God, just when you said that, I just felt, whoa, what just happened? Half a century. That's pretty long time. I can't believe it. And it is 50 years ago now, that we've had our time together, that we started this. So this journey. And, it was such an amazing time because we got together and we did things that he didn't expect to do. We went out, we got to see his friends, his brothers, as I would call them also. And he got to know his son again.
I guess, May, this is your way of setting the record straight, looking back over decades of rumors and gossip, people telling you what happened.
Yes.
And you were there and they weren't, but they'd tell you how it all played out. Did that kind of do your head in a bit when you look back over it?
Absolutely. I said, so you know everything about me? Because absolutely, I know everything about you. And you go, okay, because there's nothing you could tell me that I don't know. I mean, they literally tell me that. So I said, okay. And you have to walk away because it's like certain things you can't change their mind. And then people see the Lost Weekend title, it's the connotation of it, when you sit there and you go, oh, I don't understand why she's talking about she's only spent 2 days with him.
Right. Yeah. Wow. The takeaway from that is, of course, The Lost Weekend, a book and a movie with Ray Milland and James Wyman. It's about a headspace, really, isn't it?
Yeah, because they kept talking about his drunken time, and so John got tired. So he loved to use the metaphors, and he said it was the lost weekend,
Yes.
like Ray Milland, And so people really thought our time was only from that. It was only those 2 days. So it's a lot of people surprised after they've seen the movie that they didn't know anything about me.
I got to say, it's an eye-opener learning about you. Let's go back to the beginning. You were born in New York. When you dropped out of college, you walked into a record company. As sometimes people do, you kind of fib about what you can and can't do, and bingo, you get this job.
And I couldn't believe it. And it was wonderful. It was great training for me. It was Alan Klein's office. He had just moved into this building. And I thought, oh, how wonderful. I get to work on all this music, the publishing. He had the greatest publishing catalog besides Apple Publishing and all that. I had also the Cameo Parkway, which of course was like D.D. Sharp and all those Philadelphia sound. And he had the Rolling Stones. He was also managing them at the time when I got there. And I was like, yes, I was so thrilled to learn all about it.
I mean, all of that in itself must have been a pinch yourself moment because you were about 19 at this point, is that right?
I just turned 19. Here's the best one. I was there maybe 2 weeks. I hadn't hit 19 yet. I got to learn how to worked a little switchboard, and I'm sitting there, and this call comes in, and it's a guy from some radio station out of Detroit. He said, "We're calling because, we want to speak to somebody at Apple Records." And I said, what's in reference to? And he goes, "Well, we hear that Paul McCartney's dead," right? And I said, "We haven't heard." "No, you haven't heard?" I said, "No." So I tried to get somebody inside the office to see if anybody wants to take the call. They said, "No, you deal with it." So of all the things, so when they put out a story, they said, "We spoke to somebody at Apple Records," and I realized they actually talked to me. This is like my second week there.
Yep.
I happened to be at the switchboard at that moment.
Yes. Alan Klein, of course, who went on to become the Beatles manager, eventually assigned you as John Lennon and Yoko Ono's personal assistant. What were your first impressions of John and Yoko?
I tried to go with, I guess I was a little too straight for their avant-garde type of thing. He looked scruffy. It was that period where he was wearing his overalls. I felt like he hadn't taken a bath in weeks, that type of look. And they were both dressed in black. And I thought, okay. And here they were making 2 short films. It was her idea. And I said, she comes over to me and she goes, "I want you to call the people in my phone book. Tell them you're my assistant and you want them to come down and, donate their legs for peace." And I was taken aback by looking at all the names. You're going to be calling Jackie Kennedy, you're calling, Osamu Noguchi, these famous artists, and you're going, "Can you come down and donate your legs for peace?" And, the movie's called Up Your Legs Forever. She wanted 365 pairs of legs for the movie, like she did for Bottoms. That was her other movie.
Yes.
And then the other movie was Fly.
Oh, yeah.
Which was, yes. And this is all done in the dead of winter. And we're all getting these flies and we're trying to save the fly from flying out the window. And it's crawling over this woman's body, nude. And I'm thinking, oh, I couldn't handle it. John's sitting there going, "I think I want a Whopper." He wanted a Whopper, a Burger King Whopper at the time.
Oh, well, if that didn't attract the flies, I'm not sure what would.
I don't know what, yeah.
Mate, was Yoko genuinely artistically eccentric? She had this extraordinary vision, and that's without doubt. Or do you think it was part of a carefully curated, crafted image to make her seem just really fascinating and very avant-garde and on edge?
It's a bit of both. And I tend to say that only because I don't know how many people want to go around, you eat an apple and you put it back on a platform and say that's art. I'll give you a perfect example. We had somebody working in the office with me, and he was from Yoko's crowd. And I remember coming into the office early because that's what I was due, trying to get my head wrapped around the morning. And I come in and I saw this note that John had said, and he's going, "If you're going to drink the effing coffee, then make an effing pot before you effing leave." It was just like, it leapt off the pages of how angry he was that there was a pot of coffee now gone because he loved coffee so much, right? So I said, "Whoops, okay." To the next person. After I got my cup of coffee, I said, "Well, there's enough." Next person. So I leave and somebody else said, "Did you see that note?" I said, "I know. Oh, it's terrible." I come down to the office of this other guy. His name is John. And he says, and I walk in and I see the note. Now it's hanging on the wall. And I went, "Oh no." And I said to him, "Why are you putting that note? It's a terrible note. It's screaming at us and it's not a nice note." He goes, "It's a work of art." I said, "Oh my God." I said, "If I write that type of note, would you consider it a work of art?" He goes, "No, you're not John Lennon." I said, "Okay." Well, I was so upset by it anyway. So as I tore out of his office, I run right into John. And he goes, and he looked at me and he said, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yeah." Didn't even want to say anything. I just said, "Yeah." And I'm walking down the hall and he knew I just said, I had just come out of that office, and he went in there, and I heard him go, "Get that piece of paper off the wall. I left you guys a note. This is not for public consumption every day. This is so you know." And all I heard was, "Oh yes, sir. Oh yes, John. You're right. Okay." And that came flying out.
So many dynamics to your documentary, and some of them really kind of, get to your heart. Like, of course, we know that John was previously married to Cynthia. They had a son, Julian. The marriage broke up, of course, when John began a romance with Yoko. But eventually, May, you brought Julian and his father back together, and then Cynthia into the equation, and you all become such great friends. How were you able to do that?
That's a good question. I can't even answer. It was organic. You do something from the heart. I mean, I saw John pacing before Julian arrived, a couple of days, and even at the airport, he's just pacing. And I remember saying to him, "What's wrong?" He goes, "I wish Cynthia wasn't coming." And I said, "Why?" And he said, well, he hadn't seen Cynthia since, they broke up, right? So I said, "Guess what? You have no rights. You haven't been the father that you should be." And I told him, and I said, "Once we establish something, then we could work from there." And I said, "Don't worry, I will help you along so you can get this to work, so everything will fall into place. And until then, you'll just have to eat it. And Cynthia has all the rights to bring Julian." And of course, it all worked out. They actually found closure. They talked to one another. They found the closure they needed. And at that point, everything just sort of eased out. Cynthia was fine with letting Julian come over on his own. And now John could call to speak to Julian, which I made him do every week. And there was no more anxiety about, "Oh, I'm going to talk to Cynthia." So it all worked out.
To your romance with John, I mean, over the decades, it seems everybody has had some kind of take on your romance. His marriage to Yoko had hit a bad spot. You confirm in this documentary what had been rumored, but we didn't know, that Yoko wanted you both to get together. And I'm guessing the reason she did that was because she never thought that you'd fall in love. She just thought this would be some kind of weird distraction or something. Would that be right?
Yeah, you're right about that. I mean, definitely, they weren't getting along. They were having a problem that was beyond their own, the scope. It was terrible because when you're working in the environment, you could feel the tension between the two. So she wanted a break. She was interested in other people. She was not sitting at home alone and thinking, "Oh, okay, I'm going to sit here in my ivory tower." She actually was interested in seeing other people, but she needed to get her husband out of the way. And I'm just saying, I don't want to be it. When she came and asked me at 9:30 in the morning, even before my first cup of coffee, and I'm sitting there going, "Oh, no, no, no." And I said no, and she said yes, and we went back and forth, and then she goes, "Oh, it will," and she walks out. And I just said, I didn't know what just happened, and I said I didn't want to be there. But it wasn't until, and I refused, and it wasn't until John himself decided to chase after me, as it were. He didn't know what was happening either. Because I asked him later, I said, "What happened to you?" And when Yoko was doing this to me, and he goes, "I had no idea." She comes in and she says, "I fixed it." And he's going, "What did you fix now?" And he goes, "I fixed it so you can go out with May." And he just sort of like, "What? How do you know I even like her?" He goes, "Oh, I know." And he's like, he wouldn't come out of his room. I wouldn't come out of my office. And we're all like, she was having the time of her life, sit in the middle of it.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Kind of controlling everything like they're chess pieces on a board. When she says, "Oh, I've fixed it," it's like she's fixing a crack in the ceiling.
I
Very
know.
strange, isn't it, when you think about it? And this is the extraordinary dynamic. You and John did fall genuinely and deeply in love. It was kind of like the universe had swept you two together.
True. And I didn't find out until many, many, many years later from Larry Kane, the the announcer journalist that was on towards the end when he was doing the weather. And he said to me when he was doing his book, did you not know that John said that the happiest moments of his life were spent with you? I said, I had no idea. Where would I find this out? I didn't realize he even told anybody. So he said, yeah, he told me. And he had the best time he had wished. And I know that he had wished for a while that he said, I wish we had gone together way before.
Yes.
And I didn't even want to go into that direction.
Then you moved to Los Angeles, I'm guessing kind of for a fresh start.
Let me stop you there. We went to Los Angeles. We didn't really move there. We couch surf everybody's homes just to find a place. We always came back to New York, but people didn't hear our antics, only the LA antics, as it were. But we lived in New York.
There was that wonderful story of you and Ringo Starr, I think you said, was kind of like one of your very special Beatles. And you lived with him for a little bit too, didn't you?
That was in LA. We were in a hotel. It was just amazing that he was with his brothers, as I would call it. He got a chance to see Paul. He saw George at the end, which was lovely, because he turned around and George was sitting there, and he said to me, he goes, I'm glad you're with him. And then he looked at John and he said, I'm glad you're with her. And I just sort of like sat there and didn't know what to say, because it was just one of those, because just prior to that moment, just so you know, we were sitting there and George goes, I want to see your eyes. And of course he had the sunglasses on. So he takes off his sunglasses and he puts on another pair of glasses, but they are also dark, so you don't see his eyes. And he looked over at him, he leaned in and he just put his hands out and he ripped it right from his face. He took off the glasses and I'm sitting there like, don't hit him. Please, let's not have a fight. And he goes, and John sat very calmly. And he goes, I just want to see your eyes. He went nose to nose with him. And he goes, and John said, can you see them now? He said, yes, I wanted to see what they look like. And he wanted to hear and see the truth out of his eyes. And he goes, and that's when, he goes, I'm good.
You think about that year and a half, the incredible things that happen, as you've just said. He wrote a song for you, Surprise, Surprise, Sweet Bird, a Paradox, Just So Beautiful, which was on his Walls and Bridges album. He had a #1 hit, which goes to show just that incredible energy that you two had together, whatever gets you through the night.
And my vocals, don't forget my vocals there.
Right, I know. And then being part of that whole Imagine thing too, May, I think it must have been like those goosebumps moments, where you just think, I can't believe I must be some alien being in another world or something or other. But what was the John Lennon that you got to know really like? You got to know him so deeply. Was he funny? Was he romantic? Was he witty? How would you summarize him?
He was everything. And he used to call himself, he goes, I'm a chameleon or chameleon. I don't know how to say it. That's what he used to do. He goes, I'll be whatever you want. But what it was is that he was witty.
Yes.
He was so witty. I mean, he never thought of himself so funny at all, but he was. He didn't think of himself as big, like he didn't think he was a good singer, and there was all these little, insecurities that I would have to now discover and try and bring him back up to a space where he'd been torn down, because I know that he didn't, Yoko would say, you don't need to do that. You don't need to do this. And it got to the point that he didn't do it. And it was just weird now. He wasn't singing. Like he goes, I think my voice is not that good, so it's okay. Mess it up, he tells the engineer. And I would say, no, it sounds great. I don't know if this song is good. So he was losing his confidence, But there were days he said, what should we do today? And I said, oh, let's take a bus ride. And I took him on a bus in New York. And he said, really, take a bus ride? I said, yeah, let's just take it. And we were on for a long time until somebody said, does that look like John Lennon sitting on the bus? Until finally somebody yelled out. He goes, hey, John. He goes, hey. He goes, I told you it was him. And John looked at me calmly. He says, time to get off. So we then got off the bus. And, and then, of course, where we live, we saw the UFO.
Yes, 1974.
Yeah, we just seen the UFO as well. So we've done, yeah, we have done quite a number of different things and packed up in that little time
Oh,
frame.
yeah. And the whole UFO incident, too. I mean, absolutely fascinating to me because between you, me, and the gatepost, mate, I totally believe in that. And I know a whole bunch of other people saw that UFO on that very day. You know, these blinking lights, you two were looking up, and there it was. And he references that, of course, on the Walls and Bridges
And
album.
Bridges, yeah.
Look, even 50 years on and reliving the moment when you and John split and he went back to Yoko, you become understandably so hugely emotional, which I think just goes to underscore the depth of feeling that you had for him and he with you. I want to know this. Do you think he actually wanted to leave you, May? I mean, I know you don't have a crystal ball. How do you know? And to get in somebody's head. But for some reason in my heart, after watching your movie, I just get the feeling maybe he really didn't.
He didn't,
Mm-hmm.
because he said that. And I said, where does this go? He said, Yoko told him that he could come back. And the reason was, and I've not said this before, it's because it was for his immigration, that it would be better for him for immigration purposes. So that always stuck with him because that was his nightmare, that he'd be thrown out of the country. So that was the thing that feared the most. So I guess that was the easiest way to get him back. She tried all year. I mean, she got Paul to come down to ask him questions. That didn't go. And he never knew that Paul was sent by her, that it was by Yoko. So never knew.
Again, it was just mind games all the way through, wasn't it, essentially?
Yeah, he never knew half the things that was being done in the background constantly.
He was such a man of immense charisma. And those incredible souls and spirits just don't vanish into the ether. Do you feel him around you sometimes?
Oh, absolutely. I just don't always acknowledge it. And believe me, when I don't acknowledge him and he's trying to give me a message, it's like it's like a bomb hitting all the time. I could feel it. And I'm like, all right, what do you want? You know, I got it, you know, but I don't always acknowledge it because sometimes it's just a tap of hello and I'll go, I got it.
Yeah.
But when he really wants to send a message, it's there. I mean, it's very loud and clear. I mean, I'll give you a perfect example. I was in a taxi and I didn't know what to do. And I was trying to think, I said, if this is the right decision I should make. And I said, John, because it's involving him somewhere, I said, give me a sign. Just give me a sign. I'm sitting in the taxi. So taxi pulls up to where I live. As I'm getting out, Number 9 Dream comes on the radio.
Wow.
You can't make those things up.
No, you can't. I was going to say he's kind of almost like an angel on your shoulder, but can I tell you this? After watching your movie, you were actually the angel on his shoulder.
Oh, thank you.
That's very true. You remain great friends until the end. And a lot of people don't realize that. And, you know, you had your moments where it went beyond a friendship. He left us in 1980 murder. You surely never get over that devastation. You surely never get over that shock.
No, you don't. It is, it was just, I'm listening to the radio and hearing this, and I'm going, this can't be. It just can't be. And it's even now, I never want to even think, because somebody said, well, how do you feel? He's around me all the time. The music is around you. So you never think of him really gone in that sense, you know, but the physical, yeah, I'm just in shock. You know, I can't believe it. And and people have asked me about George. I said, when I was around, he was friends with all of them. And I heard when George wrote his book and John was upset that he wasn't mentioned in it. And I said, well, he would have been mentioned if I was there, because that was not the dynamic. You know, we went to see George, and he said, and he told George, he goes, if you need my help on your tour, I will be there for you.
You know, the takeaway from The Lost Weekend, A Love Story, is just that, May, that you had the most extraordinary love story. Hollywood couldn't write it as a movie script, you know, and there were you as a part of it. And I know you don't have a crystal ball, but you do have extraordinary insight. And John is around you all the time, as you say. Do you think that if he hadn't left us, do you think that he and Yoko would still be together in your heart? Do you think maybe you and John might have gotten back together? How do you think the future may have played out?
You're right. I don't have a crystal ball. I could only have thought there is a possibility that we would get back together again. Unfortunately, he left every one of us, in that sense. And it was difficult, but he left us with his spirit of all the stuff that he has done in his short time that he was here.
I understand that Yoko isn't in the greatest of health, but
No.
I know years ago you did have the most astonishing encounter in Iceland, of all places. That must have been weird.
I mean, it was so strange. It was, we get there, we land because I'm on my way to Liverpool, to do it was a little event that Iceland Air had promoted, but you have to stop in Reykjavik. And I'm thinking, yay, Iceland, how wonderful, overnight, I'm good. As I get off the plane, they said, Yoko's in the same hotel as you. Oh. And I went, oh, okay. All right. So when I get to the hotel, we're all in, and I drop her a little note to say I'm in the same hotel, and, and said hello. Well, obviously I wasn't hearing from her. So the next morning, because we were leaving the next day, we're all down in the restaurant, and press people and people who are in the parties. So place was buzzing. Got my food. I'm sitting here, and there's a banquet all along the wall. My girlfriend comes back. She goes, oh, I said, what? She goes, you don't know. She goes, she just asked me what I should have for breakfast. I said, who? She goes, Yoko. And I looked up, and I turned my head, and I said, oh, okay, I guess I'd better go and say hello to her. So I get up, and like a table filled with food, she's on one side, I'm on the other. She has her assistant one way, and she has a woman holding her food on the other way. So I come over across from her, and I say, Yoko, and she puts her head down, looks down. I go, Yoko, and she looks in one direction. I'm standing opposite of her. So I go, Yoko, and she looks in the other direction. And then finally, there's no other way to go but up. So I said, Yoko, and she finally looks up at me. I said, it's May. And she goes, and she looks at me, and she goes, hello. And I went, just wanted to say hello and wish you well. And she goes, thank you. And I said, okay. I turned around, and the place watched us, that you could hear a pin drop in this place. So I turned around, and I went, okay. Sat down, and we're sitting opposite, and I just all of a sudden caught out of the corner of my eye again. I said, she's wandering around the food area again. Now, she had all the food brought to her table. So I'm sitting there going, she's looking for me. I know she's looking for me.
Yes.
And sure enough, I saw her stop at the end of the banquet, and she's looking over, and she goes, and then she's waving like this and smiling. And I'm thinking, oh no, this is take two, because the first one was too very removed, right? So I said, is she really waving to me? So I turn around to look, and I went, oh, yeah, it's me. So I went like this, and my girlfriend looks up. She goes, who are you waving to? I said, Yoko. She goes, oh my God, again? I said, yeah, because she's asking, how are you? How are you feeling? And I'm like, didn't we just do that a minute ago and you didn't answer me? So that's what happened in Iceland. The best part, it was on John's birthday. So I know he had something to do with it.
If you could look into Yoko's heart, you'd have to say, I bet there was a time in her life where she was completely and utterly regretting having suggested what was some act of control, getting you two together, because, if you could ever figure a good place for the word backfire, that would probably be it. Don't you agree?
Yes. I know that she never thought that it would be that. I know that because I was talking to Jerry Rubin, the activist.
Yes.
And I talked to him because he got some job on Wall Street. And I called him up, and I saw, and he goes, how did you find me? I said, Jerry. I said, you're all over the newspaper about here you are, a yippie radical, and you got a capitalist type job. Of course, I always knew you wanted this. And he goes, well, and he's talking to me. So he said, do you ever talk to Yoko? And I said, no, do you? And he said, yes. And I just sort of like, oh, what does she have to say? And he said, well, she really didn't think it was going to be beyond 2 weeks.
Yeah.
She didn't think you two were going to get together.
Yeah. And instead, for eternity, because you're always going to be in your lives, whether you're on this earthly plane or somewhere else. So tell me about the Maypang of 2023. You're involved with animal rights causes, you make jewelry, and peace is a part of your life too.
Yeah, I do. I do all sorts of things. I make my feng shui jewelry. I just make different things. It's just making it happy, keeping the world in an even keel. There's too much other junk that goes on.
Well, and not only that, but it is like you're carrying John's torch still, isn't it? Because that was all about, his kind of thing was about peace and so forth, and just being kind to people and kind to animals and just kind in general.
Right. And he always wanted that, and he always wanted to know why we couldn't have peace. Always.
May, it has been such a true joy chatting with you. And I mean it, the Lost Weekender love story is riveting. I mean, just thinking about it now, I get a little tear in my eye. It is on Blu-ray DVD, so in fabulous quality, video on demand. And I can say this to you, bravo.
Thank you so much.
Seriously, wonderful, compelling. What a story, eh?
Thank you. Thank you, Kelley.